Kai Nakamura had always believed that the universe possessed a twisted sense of humor. How else could one explain why a man with a degree in xenolinguistics from Mars University ended up scrubbing biowaste dispensers on the most remote research station in known space? The irony wasn't lost on him as he guided his maintenance cart through the sterile corridors of Nexus 7, humming an old Earth tune that his grandmother used to sing. The gravitational stabilizers hummed their familiar lullaby, creating the artificial 1G environment that kept humans from floating into the ceiling fixtures. Kai had grown fond of that sound over the past 2 years. It reminded him that despite being 73 light-years from home, some things remained reassuringly constant. Unlike his career prospects, which had taken a spectacular nosedive after the infamous Zephyrian diplomatic incident that had earned him a one-way ticket to the galactic equivalent of Siberia. "Morning, beautiful," he whispered to the atmospheric recycling unit as he performed his daily ritual of checking its filters. The machine responded with a satisfied wheeze, processing the station's air supply with mechanical contentment. Kai had named most of the equipment during his tenure here. The coffee synthesizer was Brewster, the main computer terminal was Chatty, and the temperamental waste disposal unit was Bitey, for reasons that had required 3 separate medical reports. The comm system crackled to life, interrupting his mechanical meditation. "Attention all personnel, incoming transport vessel approaching docking bay 7. Prepare for specimen delivery. This is a level orange security protocol. All non-essential personnel maintain standard distance from the cargo areas." Kai snorted. Everything was level orange around here. Last week, Dr. Vance had declared a level orange alert because someone had left a sandwich in the break room refrigerator for more than 48 hours. The man treated expired dairy products like potential weapons of mass destruction, which, considering the quality of synthesized food on Nexus 7, wasn't entirely unreasonable. Through the reinforced viewport, Kai watched the transport vessel maneuver toward the docking clamps. The ship bore the distinctive markings of the Terran Scientific Consortium, its hull scarred from atmospheric entries on dozens of worlds. These cargo runs brought everything from mineral samples to what the researchers euphemistically called biological specimens. Kai preferred not to think too deeply about what that meant. His imagination had been far too active since reading the station's incident reports during his first week. The docking procedures took exactly 17 minutes and 33 seconds. Kai knew this because he had timed every arrival for the past 18 months, a habit born from the peculiar boredom that came with maintaining a research station where the most exciting daily event was usually the synthesizer producing coffee that didn't taste like recycled boot leather. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors as the cargo teams began their work. Kai continued his rounds, avoiding the restricted areas where serious-looking people in lab coats carried sealed containers with biohazard warnings. He had learned early in his tenure that curiosity was discouraged among maintenance staff, particularly curiosity that involved asking questions about the contents of those containers. The electromagnetic sensors throughout the station began registering unusual readings, their displays shifting from the standard green to an amber warning state. Kai paused beside one of the monitoring stations, frowning at the fluctuating energy signatures. In his xenolinguistics training, he had studied various forms of alien communication, including electromagnetic patterns used by several species for long-distance messaging. These readings felt different, more complex, almost like background chatter from multiple sources. "Kai, you're needed in Section C7, came Dr. Martinez's voice through his personal communicator. "Something's interfering with our containment field generators down there." Section C7 housed the xenobiology wing, where the research teams conducted their studies on whatever unfortunate creatures had been collected during the consortium's scientific expeditions. Kai had only been there a handful of times, usually to repair environmental controls or clear blockages from the atmospheric circulation systems. The section always made him uncomfortable, filled with the kind of sterile silence that suggested things were being observed rather than living freely. He made his way through the security checkpoints, submitting to the routine biometric scans that confirmed his clearance level. The guards knew him well enough by now, offering the casual nods that passed for social interaction among the night shift personnel. Guard Morrison even managed a smile, which was remarkable considering that the man's facial expressions usually ranged from mild suspicion to outright hostility. The electromagnetic interference grew stronger as Kai descended into the lower levels. His equipment began registering readings that shouldn't have been possible within the station's shielded environment. The containment fields in this section were designed to prevent exactly this kind of energy bleed-through, yet the monitors showed continuous fluctuations that defied explanation. Dr. Martinez met him at the entrance to the main observation area, her usually composed demeanor showing signs of strain. The reading started about an hour ago, she explained, gesturing toward a bank of monitoring equipment that resembled an electronic seizure. We've checked all the standard sources, but the pattern doesn't match anything in our databases. Kai examined the displays, noting the rhythmic variations in the electromagnetic signatures. To his trained ear, the patterns resembled communication attempts, though unlike any linguistic structure he had encountered during his academic studies. Has anyone tried cross-referencing these with xenolinguistic databases? He asked. You think this is some kind of language? Dr. Martinez raised an eyebrow. The readings are coming from the containment units. Unless one of our specimens is broadcasting radio signals, I don't see how that's possible. The containment area stretched before them, a series of transparent enclosures designed to house various forms of alien life under controlled conditions. Most of the units appeared empty or contained mineral samples, but several showed signs of recent occupation. Environmental controls maintained appropriate atmospheric conditions for whatever had been stored within, while monitoring systems tracked vital signs and behavioral patterns. One particular enclosure drew Kai's attention, not because of its appearance but because of the absolute stillness within. A small creature, no larger than a house cat, sat motionless in the center of the specialized habitat. Its scales shimmered with an iridescent quality that seemed to absorb and reflect the artificial lighting in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Despite its diminutive size, something about the creature's presence felt far more significant than its physical dimensions would suggest. That one arrived on today's transport, Dr. Martinez noted, following his gaze. Preliminary scans indicate draconic physiology, though much smaller than typical specimens. It hasn't moved or responded to any stimuli since arrival. Kai studied the young dragon, noting the way its large eyes tracked movement outside the enclosure while its body remained perfectly still. The creature's expression held an intelligence that seemed almost human in its depth, yet completely alien in its focus. Those eyes had seen things that existed beyond human understanding, had witnessed worlds and experiences that no terrestrial creature could comprehend. Has it tried to communicate? Kai asked. Not so much as a whisper. The research team attempted standard contact protocols, but got nothing. They're classifying it as non-responsive. Dr. Martinez checked her tablet, scrolling through preliminary reports. Designation XB-447. They'll begin comprehensive studies tomorrow once the proper equipment arrives. The electromagnetic readings spiked suddenly, causing several monitoring systems to emit warning chirps. Kai watched the displays fluctuate wildly before settling back into their previous patterns. The young dragon's eyes seemed to focus on him for a moment, a brief connection that felt far more intense than simple visual contact. I should get back to the interference problem, Kai said, though his attention remained fixed on the small creature. Something about its stillness suggested not the absence of response, but the careful observation of someone deciding whether to trust what they saw. As he began checking the containment field generators, Kai found himself glancing repeatedly toward the dragon's enclosure. The creature continued its motionless vigil, but he could swear that those ancient eyes were watching him with growing interest. Perhaps the universe's sense of humor was more complex than he had originally believed. Perhaps a xenolinguist disguised as a janitor was exactly what this situation required. 3 days had passed since the electromagnetic incident, and Kai's maintenance schedule had mysteriously expanded to include the xenobiology wing on a daily basis. Dr. Martinez claimed it was due to persistent environmental anomalies, but Kai suspected she had noticed his unusual interest in the research specimens. The woman possessed the observational skills of a surveillance satellite and the subtlety of a neutron bomb when it came to managing her department. "Bitey's acting up again," Kai announced to the empty corridor as he wheeled his cart toward the lower levels. The waste disposal unit had developed a concerning habit of making grinding noises that sounded suspiciously like cursing in binary code. Engineering had scheduled a repair for next month, which in station time meant sometime before the heat death of the universe. The security checkpoint guards had grown accustomed to his daily visits, though Morrison still insisted on running the full biometric scan every single time. The man approached security protocols with religious devotion, as if unauthorized personnel might spontaneously develop the ability to alter their DNA between shifts. "Morning, sunshine," Morrison grunted, barely looking up from his crossword puzzle. 7 letters for stubborn space janitor who keeps visiting the monster zoo. "Charming," Kai replied, pressing his palm against the scanner. "I prefer sanitation engineer with xenobiological interests." "That's way more than 7 letters. The containment area felt different today, charged with an energy that made the air itself seem to vibrate with possibility. The electromagnetic readings had stabilized into a more consistent pattern, though they continued to spike whenever Kai approached the dragon's enclosure. The research teams had attributed this to equipment sensitivity, but Kai suspected something far more interesting was occurring. The young dragon remained in its customary position, seated in the center of the transparent habitat like a living statue carved from starlight and scales. Its eyes tracked Kai's movement the moment he entered the observation area, a behavior that the research notes had failed to mention. Either the scientists weren't as observant as they claimed, or the dragon was being deliberately selective about when it chose to show awareness. "Good morning, XB-447, Kai said softly, positioning his cart near the enclosure. The creature's ears, pointed and elegant like something from ancient Earth mythology, twitched slightly at the sound of his voice. "I know that's not much of a name. The research team isn't exactly known for their creativity. Last month they named a sentient crystal formation rock sample 23B. The crystal actually complained." He began his cleaning routine, moving through the familiar motions while maintaining a steady stream of conversation. The dragon's eyes followed his every movement, its head turning with subtle precision to keep him in sight. The behavior suggested intelligence far beyond what the preliminary reports had indicated, but then again, most research teams seemed to mistake silence for stupidity. "You know, I used to study languages before I ended up here," Kai continued, wiping down the observation window with practiced efficiency. "Spent 5 years learning how different species communicate. The Zephyrians use color patterns, the Andromedans prefer chemical signals, and the Centauri apparently consider aggressive posturing a valid form of poetry. Never did figure out that last one." The dragon shifted position for the first time since its arrival, moving closer to the transparent barrier. The motion was fluid and deliberate, like water flowing uphill in defiance of physics. Those large eyes focused on Kai with an intensity that made him feel as though he was being thoroughly evaluated by an ancient and inscrutable intelligence. "That's progress," Kai said, offering what he hoped was an encouraging smile. "Most of the research subjects here just ignore me completely. Last week I spent 40 minutes trying to have a conversation with what turned out to be a decorative mineral formation. Dr. Vance still hasn't let me live that down." The containment field hummed softly, maintaining the artificial environment that kept the dragon healthy and comfortable. According to the environmental readouts, the habitat replicated the atmospheric conditions of a Class M planet with elevated oxygen content and trace amounts of exotic gases that Earth-based life forms couldn't even pronounce properly. Kai reached into his cleaning supplies and withdrew a small device that resembled a cross between a tuning fork and a medical scanner. The harmonic resonator had been a parting gift from his xenolinguistics professor, designed to detect and analyze sound frequencies across the entire audible spectrum. He had been carrying it for 2 years, hoping someday to find a practical use for academic equipment on a maintenance station. "Let's see if you respond to different frequencies," Kai said, activating the device. The resonator emitted a soft, melodic tone that seemed to hang in the air like crystallized music. The dragon's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. Its head tilted in a gesture of curiosity, and the electromagnetic readings on nearby monitors spiked dramatically. Kai adjusted the frequency, cycling through various harmonic patterns that different species used for communication. The dragon showed increasing interest as he explored the upper registers, its body language shifting from cautious observation to what could only be described as hopeful attention. "You like music," Kai observed, noting the way the creature leaned toward the source of the sound. "That's interesting. Musical appreciation usually indicates complex cognitive development. The research team might want to revise their preliminary assessments." The dragon opened its mouth for the first time, revealing rows of crystalline teeth that sparkled with inner light. No sound emerged, but the gesture was clearly an attempt at vocalization. The electromagnetic readings went completely haywire, as if the creature was broadcasting on frequencies that the station's equipment couldn't properly interpret. "You're trying to sing along," Kai realized, his excitement growing. "The interference isn't random at all. You're attempting to communicate, but your natural frequency range is beyond our standard monitoring capabilities." He spent the next hour experimenting with different harmonic patterns, documenting the dragon's responses with the dedication of a true scientist. The creature showed remarkable intelligence in its reactions, quickly learning to associate specific tones with different meanings. When Kai played ascending scales, the dragon would lift its head. Descending patterns caused it to lower its gaze. Complex harmonies prompted what could only be described as draconic applause, a gentle tapping of claws against the habitat floor. "You understand pattern recognition," Kai said, marveling at the creature's cognitive abilities. "This is far more sophisticated than anyone realized. You're not just intelligent, you're trying to establish a communication protocol." The dragon moved even closer to the barrier, pressing one small paw against the transparent surface. The gesture was unmistakably deliberate, a reaching out that transcended species boundaries. Kai found himself placing his own hand against the glass, matching the dragon's position in a moment of interspecies connection that felt more significant than any diplomatic treaty. "I wish I could understand what you're trying to tell me," Kai said softly. "The electromagnetic patterns you're generating are incredibly complex. If I had the right equipment, I might be able to decode them into something resembling language." The security cameras throughout the xenobiology wing dutifully recorded every moment of the interaction, their digital eyes capturing images and sounds that would later be analyzed by systems far beyond the station's immediate knowledge. In the depths of space, receivers monitored every transmission, every electromagnetic pulse, every whispered word that passed between the human janitor and the small dragon who was learning that not all captivity meant abandonment. Kai's communicator chirped with an incoming message from Dr. Martinez. "The environmental readings in Section C7 have stabilized," her voice reported. "Whatever you did down there seems to have resolved the interference problem." "Just a little harmonic adjustment," Kai replied, smiling at the dragon. "Sometimes the solution is simpler than everyone expects." As he prepared to leave, the dragon performed something that could only be described as a bow, lowering its head in a gesture of unmistakable gratitude. The electromagnetic readings pulsed in what felt like a rhythm of farewell, a pattern that Kai somehow understood meant, "Until tomorrow." "See you tomorrow, little one," he said, already planning to bring more sophisticated acoustic equipment for their next session. "We're going to figure this out together." The dragon watched him go, its ancient eyes holding secrets that spanned galaxies and the growing hope that perhaps, in this sterile place of captivity, it had finally found someone who understood that silence didn't mean surrender. Kai had spent the better part of his evening shift borrowing equipment from various departments throughout Nexus 7. The portable acoustic analyzer from the communications array would probably be missed by morning, but he figured Dr. Chen wouldn't notice until at least Thursday. The man was notorious for his absent-minded approach to inventory management, once spending 3 days looking for a quantum spectrometer that had been sitting on his desk the entire time. "Tonight we're going professional," Kai announced to his reflection in the bathroom mirror, practicing his most reassuring smile. "No more amateur hour with makeshift equipment. We're going to crack this communication barrier like Brewster cracked synthesized coffee beans." The comparison wasn't particularly flattering, considering that Brewster had been producing coffee that tasted suspiciously like liquid disappointment for the past 6 months. Engineering kept promising repairs, but their definition of urgent seemed to encompass geological timescales. Morrison was reading what appeared to be a romance novel when Kai approached the security checkpoint, the cover featuring a suspiciously muscular alien warrior embracing a swooning human female. The guard quickly stuffed the book under his desk, his face reddening to approximately the same shade as the book's cover. "Don't say a word," Morrison growled, running the biometric scan with unnecessary vigor. "It's research. For understanding interspecies relationships." "Absolutely," Kai agreed with complete sincerity. "Very important to understand cultural exchange dynamics." "Is that the one where Captain Xandros of the Rigel Empire discovers love conquers all species barriers?" Morrison's glare could have powered a small fusion reactor. "How did you know that?" "Lucky guess. Also, you left the back cover showing last week." "I hear the sequel involves time travel and wedding planning." The xenobiology wing hummed with its usual complement of mysterious sounds and electronic whispers. The dragon was waiting in its customary position, but Kai noticed subtle changes in its posture that suggested anticipation rather than mere patience. The creature had learned to associate his arrival with the promise of communication attempts, and its entire demeanor radiated hopeful expectation. "Good evening, my musically inclined friend," Kai said, setting up his expanded array of acoustic equipment. "Tonight we're upgrading from harmonic resonator to full spectral analysis. If you're broadcasting on frequencies we can't normally detect, we're going to find them." The dragon tilted its head with curiosity, watching as Kai connected various cables and calibrated monitoring devices. The setup resembled something between a recording studio and a xenobiological laboratory, which was probably an accurate assessment of what they were attempting to achieve. Kai activated the acoustic analyzer and immediately regretted not bringing noise-dampening headphones. The device began scanning across the entire audible spectrum, producing sounds that ranged from barely perceptible whispers to frequencies that made his teeth ache. The dragon, however, showed remarkable tolerance for the audio assault, its attention focused entirely on the patterns emerging from the speakers. "Found something," Kai muttered, adjusting the controls as the analyzer detected response patterns in the ultrasonic range. The dragon was generating sounds far above normal human hearing, complex harmonics that registered as simple electromagnetic interference on standard monitoring equipment. The breakthrough came when Kai began playing back the dragon's own vocalizations through the analyzer's speakers. The creature's reaction was immediate and dramatic, its eyes widening with what could only be described as joy. It began moving around the habitat with fluid grace, generating increasingly complex sound patterns that the analyzer translated into audible frequencies. "You can hear yourself," Kai realized, watching the dragon's animated response to its own voice. "All this time, you've been trying to communicate, but nobody could hear you. It's like shouting into a vacuum and wondering why nobody answers." The dragon approached the transparent barrier and began what could only be described as a conversation with itself, listening to the translated playback of its vocalizations with obvious fascination. The patterns were becoming more sophisticated by the minute, suggesting that the creature was rapidly adapting its communication style to work within the limitations of the human equipment. Kai pulled out his personal tablet and began sketching simple symbols, holding them up for the dragon to see. Basic shapes, geometric patterns, representations of common objects. The dragon studied each image with intense concentration, occasionally responding with specific sound patterns that the analyzer captured and catalogued. "Circle," Kai said, showing a simple drawing. The dragon produced a pure, singing tone that seemed to embody the concept of completeness. "Square." A sharper, more angular sound emerged from the speakers. "Triangle." The response was a complex harmony that somehow suggested both stability and dynamic tension. The dragon was learning visual association at an incredible rate, but more than that, it was teaching Kai the fundamental structure of its language. Each sound pattern carried emotional and conceptual layers that went far beyond simple object identification. The creature wasn't just naming things. It was sharing its understanding of their essential nature. "You're a philosopher," Kai said with growing amazement. "These aren't just words, they're concepts. When you say circle, you're expressing the idea of infinity, completion, cycles. This is incredibly sophisticated linguistic development." The dragon moved to the center of its habitat and began producing what could only be described as a lecture. Complex patterns of sound flowed through the analyzer, creating a symphony of meaning that Kai struggled to follow. The creature was attempting to share something important, gesticulating with its small claws in a manner that suggested universal concepts. Kai frantically took notes, trying to capture the phonetic patterns and their apparent meanings. The dragon was explaining something about itself, its origins, possibly its species. The word patterns included references to concepts that human language couldn't easily express. Simultaneous existence across multiple dimensions, communication through quantum entanglement, collective consciousness spanning stellar distances. "Hold on," Kai said, raising his hand in a gesture that the dragon immediately understood and respected. "You're telling me about your people. Your actual people. Dragons aren't just large reptiles with attitude problems. You're describing a civilization." The dragon nodded enthusiastically, a gesture so human in its nature that Kai wondered if the creature was adapting its communication style to include human body language. It began drawing symbols in the air with its claws, creating complex patterns that seemed to hang in space like mathematical equations made visible. The portable holoprojector that Kai had borrowed from the Stellar Cartography Department proved invaluable for recording these aerial drawings. The dragon's symbols resembled no known written language, but they possessed an internal logic that suggested systematic development over millennia. This wasn't primitive cave painting, this was high-level academic discourse in a visual medium. "Your people are watching," Kai realized, studying the symbols that seemed to represent observation, distance, and protective concern. "Someone knows you're here. They're monitoring your situation." The dragon's response was a complex mixture of confirmation and warning, sounds that conveyed both hope and potential danger. The creature was trying to explain that its presence on the station wasn't accidental, that larger forces were involved in its capture and current circumstances. Kai's communicator chirped with an incoming message from Dr. Martinez. "The environmental readings in your section just spiked again," her voice reported. "Everything okay down there?" "Just conducting some advanced acoustic testing," Kai replied, glancing at the dragon who was listening to the conversation with obvious understanding. "The specimen is showing remarkable responsiveness to audio stimuli. Don't get too attached to the creatures, Kai. They're research subjects, not pets." The dragon produced what sounded remarkably like laughter, a cascade of harmonic tones that the analyzer translated into frequencies resembling human amusement. The creature understood far more about its situation than anyone realized, including the humor inherent in being warned not to become attached to someone who was already demonstrating sophisticated emotional intelligence. "I think the attachment might be mutual," Kai said quietly after closing the communication channel. The dragon moved closer to the barrier and pressed both paws against the transparent surface, looking directly into Kai's eyes with an expression of profound gratitude. The electromagnetic readings throughout the section began pulsing in a steady rhythm that felt like a heartbeat, a reminder that this small creature was connected to something vast and ancient and patient. "Tomorrow we're going to work on complex communication," Kai promised, packing up his equipment. "I want to understand what you're really trying to tell me about your people. And maybe figure out why they haven't come looking for you yet." The dragon's response was a single, clear tone that somehow conveyed the concept of inevitable revelation. The sound lingered in the air long after Kai had left, a musical promise that some mysteries were worth the patience required to solve them properly. Kai had managed to procure a portable holographic display unit from the astrophysics lab, along with what Dr. Peterson's inventory logs would probably list as temporarily relocated, rather than stolen. The woman had a remarkably flexible relationship with equipment ownership, provided that said equipment was returned before quarterly inspections and still functioned properly. "Today we're going full multimedia," Kai announced to the dragon, who was already positioned near the barrier in what had become their customary meeting spot. I've brought visual aids, audio enhancement, and enough processing power to translate war and peace into interpretive dance moves. The dragon's response was a series of harmonic chirps that the acoustic analyzer had learned to recognize as amusement. Over the past week, their communication sessions had developed into something resembling a university seminar conducted between species, with Kai playing the role of enthusiastic graduate student and the dragon serving as a patient professor emeritus. Morrison barely looked up from his latest literary acquisition as Kai passed through security. Today's selection appeared to involve a time-traveling archaeologist and a mysterious alien artifact, which was probably more intellectually stimulating than most of the actual research happening on Nexus 7. Dr. Martinez wants to see you after your shift, Morrison mentioned casually. Something about irregular equipment usage patterns and unauthorized research activities. I told her you were probably just talking to the specimens because you're lonely. Thanks for the character assassination, Kai replied. I prefer to think of it as interspecies cultural exchange. Very avant-garde. The xenobiology wing was buzzing with unusual activity when Kai arrived. Research teams were conducting some kind of comprehensive review, moving between enclosures with tablets and scanning equipment. Dr. Vance was present, which never boded well for anyone hoping to maintain a low profile during their work shift. Ah, Nakamura, Dr. Vance called out, his voice carrying the particular tone that supervisors used when they suspected subordinates of creative interpretations of their job descriptions. I understand you've been spending considerable time in this section lately. Environmental maintenance requires thorough attention to detail, Kai replied with practiced innocence. The atmospheric recycling systems have been showing irregular readings that require careful monitoring. Dr. Vance consulted his tablet, scrolling through what appeared to be extensive data logs. Yes, the readings have been quite irregular. Particularly around enclosure XB-447. The electromagnetic fluctuations have been increasing steadily over the past week. The dragon was watching this conversation with obvious interest, its large eyes moving between the humans as if following a tennis match. Kai noticed that the creature's posture had changed subtly, becoming more alert and focused in a way that suggested it understood the potential significance of this interaction. Dr. Martinez mentioned you've been conducting acoustic experiments, Dr. Vance continued. Unauthorized use of research equipment for personal projects is a serious violation of station protocols. I was testing whether certain frequency ranges might calm agitated specimens, Kai said, which was technically true if you ignored the fact that the dragon had never appeared agitated in the first place. Stress reduction is important for maintaining proper research conditions. Dr. Vance appeared to consider this explanation while reviewing his tablet data. The specimen has shown increased responsiveness during your presence. Brain activity scans indicate elevated cognitive function that correlates directly with your interaction schedule. Kai felt his stomach perform a small gymnastics routine. If the research team had been monitoring the dragon's neurological responses, they would have detected the dramatic increases in brain activity that accompanied their communication sessions. The creature's intelligence was no longer a secret that only he possessed. Perhaps we should conduct a formal evaluation, Dr. Vance suggested, his tone carrying the enthusiasm of a researcher who had stumbled upon unexpected data. If this specimen is demonstrating previously unknown cognitive capabilities, it could be significant for our understanding of draconic intelligence. The dragon produced a sound that the acoustic analyzer would have translated as mild concern, though to the untrained ear it probably sounded like ordinary animal vocalization. Kai recognized the pattern as a question about whether this development represented progress or potential danger. I think the specimen responds better to familiar routines, Kai said carefully. Introducing new researchers might cause stress that could affect the behavioral patterns you're trying to study. Dr. Vance's expression suggested he was weighing scientific curiosity against administrative convenience. Very well. Continue your current interaction schedule, but I want detailed reports on all observed behaviors. If this creature is demonstrating advanced intelligence, we need comprehensive documentation. After the research team departed, Kai set up his equipment with more care than usual. The dragon had remained silent during the official inspection, but now it approached the barrier with obvious relief and anticipation. "That was close," Kai said, activating the holographic display. "They're starting to notice that you're not just an ordinary specimen. We might need to be more careful about how much intelligence you display around the official researchers." The dragon nodded understanding, then began producing the complex sound patterns that had become their standard greeting ritual. The acoustic analyzer translated the harmonics into audible frequencies, revealing what sounded remarkably like, "Good morning, teacher." Kai nearly dropped his tablet. "Did you just call me teacher?" The dragon's response was a cascade of affirmative tones, followed by sounds that the analyzer interpreted as gratitude and friendship. The creature had not only learned to modify its vocalizations for human equipment, but had developed specific words for concepts that mattered to their relationship. "This is incredible," Kai breathed, setting up the holographic projector. "You're not just learning our communication methods, you're creating hybrid language that bridges our species. This is the most advanced xenolinguistic development I've ever encountered." He activated the projector and began displaying simple pictographic symbols, starting with basic concepts and gradually increasing complexity. The dragon responded to each image with appropriate vocalizations, but more importantly, it began creating its own visual responses using controlled electromagnetic emissions that the projector could detect and display. "You're drawing with electromagnetic fields," Kai realized as complex patterns appeared in the holographic display. "You can manipulate energy patterns to create visual representations. That's not just communication, that's technological interface capability." The dragon's images were becoming increasingly sophisticated, depicting concepts that human language struggled to express. Multidimensional geometry, quantum probability states, consciousness existing across multiple temporal frames simultaneously. These weren't the products of primitive intelligence, this was advanced theoretical physics expressed through artistic visualization. "Your people," Kai said, studying a particularly complex diagram that seemed to represent galactic communication networks. "They're not just watching from nearby. They're connected to you through quantum entanglement, aren't they? Real-time communication across any distance." The dragon's confirmation came as a harmony of sounds that conveyed both pride and sadness. It began projecting images that told a story: young dragons separated from their families for educational purposes, traveling vast distances to study other civilizations, maintaining contact through quantum consciousness links that transcended physical space. "You're an exchange student," Kai understood suddenly. "But something went wrong. The research expedition that captured you wasn't supposed to happen." The dragon's response included patterns that suggested accident, confusion, and protective intervention. Its people had been observing human expansion into space. Kai had managed to procure a portable holographic display unit from the astrophysics lab, along with what Dr. Peterson's inventory logs would probably list as temporarily relocated, rather than stolen. The woman had a remarkably flexible relationship with equipment ownership, provided that said equipment was returned before quarterly inspections and still functioned properly. "Today we're going full multimedia," Kai announced to the dragon, who was already positioned near the barrier in what had become their customary meeting spot. "I've brought visual aids, audio enhancement, and enough processing power to translate war and peace into interpretive dance moves." The dragon's response was a series of harmonic chirps that the acoustic analyzer had learned to recognize as amusement. Over the past week, their communication sessions had developed into something resembling a university seminar conducted between species, with Kai playing the role of enthusiastic graduate student and the dragon serving as a patient professor emeritus. Morrison barely looked up from his latest literary acquisition as Kai passed through security. Today's selection appeared to involve a time-traveling archaeologist and a mysterious alien artifact, which was probably more intellectually stimulating than most of the actual research happening on Nexus 7. "Dr. Martinez wants to see you after your shift," Morrison mentioned casually. "Something about irregular equipment usage patterns and unauthorized research activities. I told her you were probably just talking to the specimens because you're lonely." "Thanks for the character assassination," Kai replied. "I prefer to think of it as interspecies cultural exchange. Very avant-garde." The xenobiology wing was buzzing with unusual activity when Kai arrived. Research teams were conducting some kind of comprehensive review, moving between enclosures with tablets and scanning equipment. Dr. Vance was present, which never boded well for anyone hoping to maintain a low profile during their work shift. "Ah, Nakamura," Dr. Vance called out, his voice carrying the particular tone that supervisors used when they suspected subordinates of creative interpretations of their job descriptions. "I understand you've been spending considerable time in this section lately." "Environmental maintenance requires thorough attention to detail," Kai replied with practiced innocence. "The atmospheric recycling systems have been showing irregular readings that require careful monitoring." Dr. Vance consulted his tablet, scrolling through what appeared to be extensive data logs. "Yes, the readings have been quite irregular. The Deep Space Monitoring Array buried in Nexus 7's sensor grid had been faithfully recording background radiation for 3 years without registering anything more exciting than cosmic dust and the occasional rogue asteroid. Today, however, the quantum sensors were practically having nervous breakdowns, detecting massive gravitational distortions at the edge of the system that defied every known law of physics." Chief Technician Rodriguez stared at her displays with the expression of someone who had just discovered that mathematics had decided to take a personal day. "This can't be right," she muttered, running diagnostics for the 4th time in 20 minutes. "According to these readings, there's something out there with the mass of a small moon, but it's not showing up on any visual scanners." Her colleague, Dr. Singh, leaned over her shoulder to examine the data. "Cloaking technology," he suggested. "The Andorians have been working on gravitational masking for decades." "This isn't masking," Rodriguez replied, pointing to the fluctuating energy signatures. "This is something actively bending spacetime around itself. The power requirements alone would need a stellar-class fusion reactor, and we're not detecting any energy emissions." 300 million kilometers away, the Dragon vessel Eternal Vigilance maintained its position in the shadow of a gas giant's magnetosphere, its crystalline hull reflecting no light while its quantum processors analyzed every electromagnetic pulse emanating from the research station. The ship's consciousness, a collective intelligence spanning 17 individual dragons, had been monitoring their offspring's situation with growing concern and surprising admiration. Matriarch Zephyr manifested in the ship's central chamber, her humanoid form shimmering into existence with pointed ears that marked her as something far older and more powerful than the researchers on Nexus 7 could imagine. Her expression held the patient fury of a mother who had been forced to watch her child's captivity while evaluating whether the captors deserved annihilation or education. "The young one progresses well," reported Navigator Thane, his voice carrying harmonics that would have overloaded human audio equipment. "The human maintenance worker has proven surprisingly capable of establishing communication protocols." Zephyr studied the real-time feeds that showed Kai setting up his increasingly sophisticated equipment array. "This Kai Nakamura," she said, sampling the name like fine wine. "His academic credentials suggest xenolinguistic training, yet he works in sanitation. An interesting paradox. The station records indicate a diplomatic incident in his past," Thane offered. "Something involving unauthorized first contact attempts with the Zephyrian trade delegation. Apparently he tried to establish cultural exchange protocols before receiving official permission." "A bureaucratic rebel," Zephyr mused with something approaching approval. "How refreshingly human. Most species would have executed him for diplomatic presumption. Humans merely demoted him to janitorial duties." The quantum communication array crackled with incoming data from their captured offspring. The young dragon's reports had evolved from simple distress signals to complex cultural analysis, describing not just its own treatment but the broader dynamics of human scientific research and social interaction. "The offspring reports increasing emotional attachment to the human," Thane noted. "It has chosen a name for itself, Spark. Apparently this was suggested by the human as a reference to its electromagnetic communication abilities." Zephyr's expression softened slightly. "Spark. A good name. It suggests both energy and the beginning of something larger." She paused, studying the communication logs. "The human treats our child with genuine kindness, not merely scientific curiosity. This is unexpected. The ship's sensors detected a sudden spike in activity around the research station as security protocols activated throughout Nexus 7. The humans had finally noticed the gravitational anomalies, though they remained completely unaware of what was causing them. Should we withdraw to a safer distance? Thane inquired. Human military response capabilities are limited, but they might attempt to investigate. No, Zephyr decided. It's time they knew they were being observed. But carefully. We don't want to trigger a panic that might endanger Spark or the human who has shown such unexpected wisdom. On Nexus 7, Kai was having his own crisis of confidence as he reviewed the previous day's communication logs. Spark had shared increasingly complex information about Dragon civilization, including details about their technology, social structures, and philosophical frameworks that went far beyond what any captured specimen should have been able to convey. Either you're the most well-educated research subject in galactic history, Kai said to Spark during their morning session, or your people have been feeding you information somehow. And given what you've told me about quantum consciousness networks, I'm leaning toward option 2. Spark's response was a harmonic pattern that translated roughly as, guilty as charged, followed by electromagnetic projections showing vast Dragon vessels monitoring human activities throughout the sector. The images were detailed enough to include technical specifications that made Kai's xenolinguistics training feel woefully inadequate for the situation. Your mother is out there, Kai realized, studying a holographic representation of a ship that was approximately the size of Manhattan and appeared to be constructed from crystallized starlight. She's been watching this entire time, hasn't she? The affirmative response came with emotional overtones that conveyed both love and considerable concern. Spark began projecting images that told the story of its capture, a routine cultural observation mission that had gone wrong when human research vessels had detected and pursued the young Dragon scout ship. The crash landing and subsequent capture had been accidents, but accidents with potentially significant diplomatic consequences. So this isn't just about whether humans are nice to dragons, Kai said slowly. This is a formal evaluation of our species' readiness for contact with a civilization that could probably dismantle our entire military with a strongly worded letter. Spark's amusement was palpable, though the underlying message was serious. Dragon technology was indeed far advanced beyond human capabilities, but their interest lay in cultural exchange rather than conquest. The question was whether humans could demonstrate the wisdom and empathy necessary for a beneficial relationship. Kai's communicator chirped with an urgent message from Dr. Martinez. All personnel report to emergency stations immediately. We're detecting massive gravitational anomalies in the outer system. This is not a drill. Looks like your family is making their presence known, Kai said to Spark, who was projecting images of dragons in humanoid form walking through the corridors of crystalline ships. Any advice for how humans should respond to first contact with a species that could probably fold our space station into origami? Spark's response was surprisingly practical. Images of calm communication, respectful dialogue, and the importance of not doing anything that might be interpreted as threatening. The young dragon also projected what appeared to be a formal introduction protocol, complete with harmonic greeting patterns and appropriate gesture sequences. You're giving me a crash course in dragon diplomacy, Kai realized. But I'm just a maintenance worker. Shouldn't this information go to our actual diplomatic personnel? The images Spark projected in response were less than flattering to Nexus 7's command structure, Dr. Vance panicking over paperwork, Dr. Martinez obsessing over research protocols, and various administrators running in circles while failing to accomplish anything useful. The message was clear: sometimes the most important conversations happened between individuals rather than institutions. Emergency alarms began sounding throughout the station as the gravitational distortions increased dramatically. Kai could feel the artificial gravity fluctuating slightly, a sign that whatever was out there was affecting spacetime on a massive scale. They're coming closer, Kai said, checking the station's sensor feeds on his personal tablet. Your mother is tired of waiting, isn't she? Spark's response carried tones of both anticipation and nervousness. The young dragon began preparing what appeared to be formal communication protocols, creating electromagnetic patterns that would serve as identification codes and friendly greetings when the inevitable contact occurred. You want me to be there when she arrives, Kai understood. You want me to speak for humanity because I'm the one who treated you with kindness rather than scientific detachment. The confirmation came with emotional overtones of trust and confidence that made Kai feel simultaneously honored and terrified. He was about to become humanity's unofficial ambassador to a species that measured time in millennia and treated physics as a casual suggestion rather than absolute law. No pressure, he muttered, then looked at Spark with sudden determination. All right, little friend. Let's show your mother that humans can be worth talking to. But if this goes badly, I'm blaming you for not mentioning the part about galactic politics during our first conversation. Spark's response was pure joy, a cascade of harmonics that spoke of hope, friendship, and the absolute certainty that some bridges between species were worth building regardless of the risks involved. The electromagnetic patterns began pulsing in rhythm with something vast and approaching, a heartbeat that spanned star systems and promised that the universe was about to become a much more interesting place. The situation in Nexus 7's command center could best be described as controlled panic with a side of bureaucratic confusion. Dr. Vance was frantically shuffling through emergency protocols while Dr. Martinez attempted to coordinate with various department heads who seemed more interested in protecting their research data than dealing with potential first contact scenarios. Has anyone tried turning the sensors off and on again? Suggested Lieutenant Brooks from Communications, earning glares from everyone present. I'm serious. Sometimes the gravitational sensors get confused by solar flare activity. Solar flares don't create mass shadows the size of small planets, Dr. Martinez replied with the patience of someone explaining basic physics to a particularly slow houseplant. And they definitely don't maintain perfect orbital mechanics while remaining completely invisible to our visual scanners. Kai watched the chaos unfold from the Xenobiology Wing's auxiliary monitoring station, where Spark was providing real-time commentary on human crisis management techniques. The young dragon's observations were not particularly flattering to the station's command structure. Your assessment of our leadership capabilities is disturbingly accurate, Kai admitted, listening to Spark's harmonically expressed critique of Dr. Vance's tendency to consult manuals rather than making decisions. Though to be fair, mysterious invisible spacecraft isn't covered in most administrative handbooks. The station's proximity alarms began shrieking as something massive materialized just outside the main docking bay. The appearance wasn't gradual, one moment the space was empty, and the next it contained what appeared to be a crystalline cathedral that had decided to take up residence among the stars. Well, that's new, Morrison's voice crackled over the communication system. Anyone want to explain why there's suddenly a building-sized crystal formation parked next to our docking port? The Dragon vessel Eternal Vigilance settled into position with the casual grace of something that considered physics more of a guideline than an absolute law. Its crystalline hull reflected the station's lights in patterns that seemed to shift and flow like liquid starlight, creating an effect that was simultaneously beautiful and slightly disorienting to human vision. Spark began producing excited harmonic patterns that roughly translated as, "Mom's here, and she brought the good ship." The young dragon was practically vibrating with anticipation, though whether from joy or nervousness was difficult to determine. Your mother has an impressive sense of dramatic timing, Kai observed, watching as the station's defensive systems automatically activated and then immediately shut down again when they failed to find anything resembling a threat signature. Does she always arrive unannounced, or is this special treatment for her first meeting with humans? The response suggested that Matriarch Zephyra was known throughout Dragon society for her theatrical approach to diplomacy. Apparently, the last time she had established contact with a new species, she had materialized her ship inside their planet's aurora display during their most important religious festival. Dr. Vance's voice echoed through the station's communication system, carrying the particular strain that indicated someone was reading from emergency protocols while simultaneously having a minor nervous breakdown. All personnel remain at emergency stations. We are experiencing an unscheduled visit from an unknown vessel. Diplomatic contact procedures are being evaluated. Diplomatic contact procedures, Kai repeated with amusement. I wonder if those include, try not to accidentally start an interstellar war, or, remember to offer refreshments to visiting aliens. Spark's response included images of dragon diplomatic traditions, which apparently involved elaborate gift exchanges, formal introductions that could last for several hours, and the sharing of cultural music that demonstrated each species' artistic development. The mental image of Dr. Vance attempting to conduct a formal cultural exchange while panicking over paperwork was deeply entertaining. The station's main communication array activated with an incoming transmission that bypassed all normal security protocols and appeared directly on every screen throughout Nexus 7. The image that appeared was both familiar and startling, a humanoid figure with pointed ears and an expression of patient authority that could have commanded respect from granite statues. Greetings, inhabitants of Research Station Nexus 7, Matriarch Zephyra said, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested vast age and considerable amusement. I am Zephyra of the Dragon Collective, and I believe you have something that belongs to me. Dr. Vance appeared on split screen, his face reflecting the expression of someone who had just realized that his emergency protocols manual didn't include a chapter on what to do when ancient space dragons show up demanding their children back. Welcome to Nexus 7, Dr. Vance managed, clearly struggling between official procedures and the dawning realization that normal procedures were woefully inadequate for the current situation. I am Dr. Vance, Station Administrator. We were not aware that the specimen we recovered was, that is to say, that my offspring was a sentient being rather than a laboratory specimen. Zephyra suggested with the tone of someone who had dealt with bureaucratic confusion before. An understandable mistake. Young Spark has been observing your research methods with considerable interest. The revelation that the specimen had a name and had been actively observing their behavior sent visible shockwaves through the command center. Kai could practically hear the collective realization that everything they thought they knew about their situation had just been turned upside down and shaken vigorously. You've been watching us, Dr. Martinez said, her scientific curiosity apparently overriding diplomatic caution. How long? What have you learned about our research methods? Quite a bit, Zephyra replied with what could only be described as diplomatic understatement. Your species shows remarkable diversity in its approaches to unknown situations. Some of your personnel have demonstrated wisdom and compassion that speaks well for humanity's potential development. Kai felt a sudden chill as he realized that Zephyra's evaluation had been comprehensive and ongoing. Every interaction, every decision, every moment of kindness or cruelty had been observed and judged by beings whose technological capabilities made human civilization look like an ambitious ant colony. We would like to arrange proper diplomatic contact, Zephyra continued. However, there are protocols that must be observed. I require a meeting with the individual who has been serving as cultural liaison with my offspring. Dr. Vance looked confused. Cultural liaison? We haven't assigned anyone to that position. Our research teams have been following standard specimen observation protocols. Nevertheless, Zephyra said with the patience of someone explaining simple concepts to a child, my offspring has established meaningful communication with a member of your crew. This individual has demonstrated the wisdom and empathy necessary for serving as humanity's representative in formal contact proceedings. The command center erupted in confused discussions as various department heads tried to determine who might have been conducting unauthorized communication with the dragon specimen. Kai watched this chaos unfold while Spark projected images of the inevitable moment when someone would realize that the station's janitor had accidentally become humanity's most important diplomatic asset. They're going to figure it out eventually, Kai said to Spark, who was practically glowing with anticipation. Any advice for how to explain that I've been conducting unauthorized first contact protocols with your people while pretending to clean floors? Spark's response was a harmony of encouragement and amusement, along with projected images that suggested honesty was generally the best policy when dealing with dragon matriarchs who could disassemble space stations with their thoughts. Dr. Martinez's voice suddenly cut through the command center discussions. The electromagnetic anomalies in Section C7, she said slowly. They've been increasing during Nakamura's maintenance shifts. The readings correspond exactly with increased cognitive activity in specimen XB 447. The silence that followed this revelation was the kind of quiet that preceded either celebration or execution, depending on one's perspective on unauthorized diplomatic activities. Nakamura, Dr. Vance's voice carried over the communication system with the tone of someone who had just realized that their maintenance worker had been conducting inadvertent alien diplomacy. Please report to the command center immediately. Show time, Kai said to Spark, gathering up his communication equipment. Wish me luck. I'm about to explain to my supervisors why I've been having philosophical discussions with their research specimens instead of just cleaning their cages. Spark's farewell was a symphony of confidence and affection, electromagnetic harmonies that somehow conveyed the absolute certainty that friendship could bridge any gap between species, even when that gap involved explaining to dragon matriarchs why humans had accidentally kidnapped their children while conducting routine scientific research. The walk to the command center felt significantly longer than usual, probably because Kai was acutely aware that his career was about to undergo what economists would politely term radical restructuring. The fact that he was carrying several pieces of borrowed equipment that he had never officially requisitioned wasn't helping his confidence levels. At least I'll have an interesting story to tell at unemployment meetings, he muttered, passing Morrison's security station. The guard looked up from his romance novel with an expression of mild sympathy that suggested he had already heard about the unfolding diplomatic crisis. Good luck in there, Morrison said quietly. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. That little dragon always seemed lonely. The command center was in a state of controlled chaos that resembled a university examination room during finals week. Dr. Vance was frantically reviewing xenobiological protocols while Dr. Martinez coordinated with department heads who were trying to determine whether Kai's unauthorized activities constituted a security breach, a diplomatic breakthrough, or possibly both simultaneously. Ah, Nakamura, Dr. Vance said as Kai entered, his tone carrying the particular strain of someone who was attempting to remain professional while dealing with circumstances that had wandered far beyond the boundaries of normal administration. It seems you've been conducting unofficial research activities. More like interspecies friendship, Kai replied, deciding that honesty was probably his best strategy at this point. The dragon was lonely, and I have xenolinguistics training. It seemed like basic compassion to try communicating. Matriarch Zephyr's image on the main display screen regarded Kai with an expression of interested evaluation. Her pointed ears twitched slightly, a gesture that Spark had taught him indicated amused approval in dragon body language. You are the one my offspring calls teacher, Zephyr said, her voice carrying harmonics that somehow conveyed both authority and warmth. Young Spark has shared extensive reports of your interactions. Your approach to communication has been refreshingly direct. Dr. Martinez stepped forward, her scientific curiosity apparently overriding diplomatic protocol. How exactly have you been communicating? Our standard xenolinguistic protocols indicated no response to traditional contact methods. Dragons communicate primarily through electromagnetic patterns and frequency ranges beyond normal human perception, Kai explained, grateful for the opportunity to discuss actual science rather than his employment violations. I used acoustic analyzers to translate their vocalizations into audible ranges and holographic projectors to facilitate visual communication. You reverse-engineered interspecies communication protocols using maintenance equipment? Dr. Vance asked, his expression reflecting the particular bewilderment of an administrator discovering that major diplomatic breakthroughs had been achieved with stolen office supplies. Borrowed equipment, Kai corrected. And it wasn't really reverse engineering. More like applied linguistics with creative hardware solutions. Zephyr's amusement was evident in the harmonics underlying her speech. Your species possesses a remarkable talent for creative problem-solving under unusual circumstances. This bodes well for potential diplomatic relations. The dragon matriarch gestured, and the main display split to show real-time feeds from the xenobiology wing where Spark was visible in its enclosure. The young dragon appeared to be performing what could only be described as an enthusiastic dance, creating electromagnetic patterns that painted rainbow auroras across the containment field. Spark wishes to participate in these proceedings, Zephyr explained. My offspring has become quite attached to your human friend and believes that formal introductions are necessary for proper diplomatic protocol. Dr. Vance consulted his tablet with the desperate hope that administrative procedures might somehow provide guidance for negotiating with ancient space dragons. We could arrange a secure communication link to the xenobiology wing, he suggested uncertainly. That won't be necessary, Zephyr replied. Spark, please join us. The young dragon simply materialized in the command center, appearing in a cascade of light that bypassed every security system on the station. The teleportation was so casual and effortless that it made human transportation technology look like walking everywhere while carrying heavy luggage. Several command center personnel jumped backward, though whether from surprise or instinctive caution was unclear. Spark, however, immediately approached Kai with obvious joy, producing harmonic patterns that the room's communication equipment automatically translated into sounds resembling excited greetings. Hello, teacher, came Spark's voice through the translation system, carrying emotional tones that needed no interpretation. Thank you for helping me find my voice. The silence that followed was the kind of quiet that occurred when everyone present simultaneously realized that they were witnessing something historically significant. The first successful interspecies communication between humans and dragons was happening in a research station command center, facilitated by a janitor and a young dragon who had learned to trust each other. This is remarkable, Dr. Martinez breathed, studying the translation equipment with obvious fascination. The linguistic complexity is far beyond anything we've encountered. How long have dragons possessed this level of communication sophistication? Approximately 37,000 of your years, Zephyr replied matter-of-factly. Though we prefer to measure time in more cosmic terms. Your species is quite young by galactic standards, but shows promising development potential. Dr. Vance appeared to be having difficulty processing the implications of communicating with a civilization that was older than human recorded history. You've been watching our development, he said slowly. For how long? Since your species first began using electromagnetic communications, Zephyr explained. We monitor all developing civilizations to evaluate their potential for peaceful contact. Your progress has been interesting. Spark projected holographic images that showed various moments from recent human history, apparently from the perspective of dragon observers. The images included both achievements and failures, technological advances and social conflicts, moments of compassion and instances of cruelty. We've been taking a test, Kai realized, studying the projected timeline. Everything we've done as a species has been evaluated to determine whether we're ready for contact with galactic civilization. A rather comprehensive examination, Zephyr confirmed. Your treatment of my offspring represents the final evaluation criterion. How you respond to encountering the unknown reveals much about your species' fundamental character. Dr. Vance straightened, apparently recognizing the weight of the moment. And what is your assessment of humanity? Zephyr's expression suggested someone who had reached a difficult but ultimately positive conclusion. Your species demonstrates remarkable diversity in problem-solving approaches and ethical frameworks. While some humans respond to the unknown with fear or aggression, others exhibit curiosity and compassion. The individual who befriended my offspring represents the best qualities of your civilization. No pressure, Kai muttered, then addressed Zephyr directly. What happens now? Do we pass your test and join some kind of galactic community, or do you decide we need more time to develop? That choice belongs to your species, Zephyr replied. We offer partnership, not dominion. Those who wish to learn from us may do so. Those who prefer isolation will be respected. But the invitation, once extended, cannot be rescinded. Spark moved closer to Kai, projecting images that showed possible futures, human and dragon scientists working together, cultural exchanges that spanned star systems, technological development that could solve problems neither species could address alone. The possibilities were vast and exciting, but also somewhat overwhelming. There will be protocols to establish, Dr. Vance said, his administrative instincts reasserting themselves despite the extraordinary circumstances. diplomatic procedures, cultural exchange agreements, scientific collaboration frameworks. Indeed, Zephyra agreed. However, formal negotiations require appropriate representatives. My offspring has designated its teacher as humanity's primary cultural liaison for initial contact proceedings. The command center staff turned to stare at Kai, who was beginning to understand that his job description was about to undergo some fairly significant modifications. "I'm honored," he said carefully, "but I'm not sure I'm qualified for interstellar diplomacy." "You successfully established communication with a species that had been considered non-responsive," Zephyra pointed out. "You demonstrated patience, creativity, and genuine compassion when dealing with the unknown. These qualities are more valuable for diplomacy than official credentials." Spark's enthusiastic agreement came as a harmony of supportive tones that roughly translated as, "You're perfect for the job, and I'll help with the difficult parts." Besides, Zephyra added with unmistakable amusement, "Someone who can maintain sanitation systems on a research station while conducting unauthorized linguistic research clearly possesses the multitasking abilities necessary for diplomatic work." Dr. Vance cleared his throat, apparently realizing that his maintenance worker had just been promoted to humanity's most important diplomatic position by beings who could probably relocate entire star systems if they felt like it. "Well then," Dr. Vance said with the tone of someone adapting to circumstances beyond his control, "I suppose we should discuss your new job responsibilities, Ambassador Nakamura." 6 months later, Kai stood in what had formerly been the Xenobiology Wing and was now diplomatically designated as the Interspecies Cultural Exchange Center, watching Spark demonstrate quantum consciousness networking to a group of fascinated human scientists. The young dragon had grown considerably, both physically and in confidence, though it still preferred Kai's company to the formal research sessions. The key principle, Spark explained through the translation system, its voice now carrying the harmonics of someone who had found their place in the universe, is that consciousness exists independently of physical location. Dragon minds can share experiences across any distance through quantum entanglement of neural patterns. Dr. Martinez frantically took notes while trying to wrap her scientific training around concepts that made theoretical physics look like elementary arithmetic. "So you're essentially saying that all dragons are telepathically connected through quantum mechanics?" "Not telepathy," Spark corrected with patient amusement. "Shared consciousness. We maintain individual identities while participating in collective knowledge networks. Think of it as the ultimate social media platform, but with actual meaningful content." Kai smiled, remembering when Spark had been a silent, traumatized creature huddled in a containment cell. The transformation had been remarkable to witness, though he suspected the real change had been in humanity's willingness to see intelligence where they had previously assumed primitive behavior. "Ambassador Nakamura," came Zephyra's voice through the quantum communication array that now occupied most of the former break room, "the Galactic Coordination Council has approved humanity's application for provisional membership. Your species will be granted access to the basic technological databases and cultural exchange programs." "That's excellent news," Kai replied, still adjusting to being addressed with diplomatic titles instead of, "Hey, you with the mop." His official ambassador credentials had arrived last week, along with a salary that made his previous maintenance worker paycheck look like pocket change. The integration process had not been without its complications. Dr. Vance had initially attempted to maintain his administrative authority over what he considered his research station, until Zephyra had politely explained that Nexus 7 was now designated as humanity's primary diplomatic facility and would be operating under interstellar protocols rather than human bureaucratic procedures. "The good news," Kai had told Dr. Vance during that awkward transition meeting, "is that your administrative experience qualifies you for the position of facilities coordinator for interspecies relations. It's essentially the same job, but with more exotic paperwork and occasional visits from beings who can manipulate reality." Morrison had adapted to the changes with remarkable equanimity, primarily because his security duties now included monitoring diplomatic visitors who arrived via quantum teleportation rather than standard docking procedures. He had traded his romance novels for technical manuals on dragon technology, though Kai suspected the guard still kept a few romantic stories hidden in his desk. The cultural exchange program applications have been pouring in, Dr. Martinez reported, consulting her tablet with the enthusiasm of someone who had discovered that xenobiology was infinitely more interesting when the specimens could explain their own biology. We have requests from 17 different universities and 4 government agencies who want to establish research partnerships. Spark projected holographic images showing Dragon educational facilities that existed in dimensions slightly adjacent to normal spacetime. Dragon youth are equally interested in studying human culture, it announced. Your species' approach to individual creativity and chaotic problem-solving is considered highly entertaining by our educational theorists. Entertaining, Kai repeated with amusement. I suppose that's better than being considered a galactic curiosity or potential threat. Oh, you're definitely a curiosity, Zephyr's voice carried unmistakable affection. But the positive kind. Most species develop either rigid social structures or complete chaos. Humans somehow manage both simultaneously while still accomplishing remarkable things. The transformation of Nexus 7 had required extensive modifications to accommodate the new diplomatic functions. The former containment areas had been converted into cultural exhibition spaces where humans and dragons could share art, music, and philosophical concepts. The old research labs now house translation equipment and quantum communication arrays that allowed real-time conversation across galactic distances. Bitey, the temperamental waste disposal unit, had been upgraded with Dragon technology and now functioned with mechanical perfection while occasionally humming what sounded like satisfied mechanical lullabies. Even Brewster the coffee synthesizer had benefited from technological enhancements, finally producing beverages that tasted like something other than recycled disappointment. I've been thinking about the larger implications, Kai said to Spark during one of their private conversations. Your people chose to reveal themselves because I showed kindness to you. But what if I hadn't? What if the research team had treated you poorly, or if no one had bothered trying to communicate? Spark's response was a complex harmony that conveyed both sadness and hope. Then we would have waited longer, perhaps centuries more, until your species developed greater wisdom. Dragon patience is measured in geological time scales. We prefer to wait for natural ethical development rather than force premature contact. The philosophical implications were staggering. Humanity's future among the stars had depended on a single act of compassion toward a lonely creature in a research facility. Kai wondered how many other species were quietly observing human behavior, waiting for signs that contact would be beneficial rather than catastrophic. The irony isn't lost on me, Kai mused, watching through the viewport as Dragon vessels arrived and departed with the casual frequency of interstellar taxi services. I spent years studying xenolinguistics, dreaming of first contact scenarios. Then I get demoted to janitorial work and accidentally stumble into the most important interspecies relationship in human history. Not accidentally, Spark corrected gently. Your academic training gave you the tools to recognize communication attempts. Your demotion placed you in a position where you had time and freedom to pursue unauthorized research. Your personal character made you willing to show kindness to a creature that others saw only as a specimen. Zephyr materialized in the room, her humanoid form shimmering into existence with the casual grace of someone who considered physics optional. The Council has approved your request for expanded cultural exchange programs, she announced. Human students will be welcome in Dragon educational facilities, and Dragon youth will participate in human universities. That should make for interesting campus social dynamics, Kai observed. I can already imagine the complications of dormitory arrangements for students who can teleport through dimensions. We have extensive experience with multi-species educational programs, Zephyr assured him. Though I admit, humans will present unique challenges. Most species we work with don't have quite your talent for creative chaos. Spark had been working on a special project for weeks, something involving quantum consciousness programming and holographic art that it claimed would demonstrate the fundamental nature of friendship between species. The young dragon's enthusiasm for the project suggested it was planning something significant. Are you ready to see what I've been creating? Spark asked, activating the quantum holographic projector that had been installed in the center of the cultural exchange area. The images that appeared were breathtaking in their complexity and beauty. A dynamic sculpture of light and energy that showed the development of understanding between two minds from different worlds. The hologram began with simple geometric patterns representing basic communication, evolved through increasingly complex harmonies of color and sound, and culminated in a representation of consciousness itself, two distinct patterns of thought that had learned to create harmony without losing their individual nature. It's the story of our friendship, Kai realized, watching as the patterns evolved and danced around each other. But more than that. It's a template for how different species can connect while maintaining their unique identities. Exactly, Spark said with obvious pride. This will be displayed in dragon cultural centers throughout the galaxy as an example of successful interspecies bonding. Your kindness has become a teaching tool for future first contact scenarios. Kai felt a strange mixture of humility and pride. His simple decision to treat a lonely creature with compassion had not only transformed his own life but had become a model for galactic diplomacy. The maintenance worker who had once cleaned floors in obscurity was now helping to write the protocols for humanity's expansion into a universe filled with wonders beyond imagination. So what happens next? He asked, addressing both Spark and Zephyr. Now the real work begins, Zephyr replied. Cultural exchange, technological development, philosophical exploration. Your species has earned the right to participate in galactic civilization, but that participation comes with responsibilities as well as opportunities. Spark moved closer to Kai, its electromagnetic field creating patterns of warmth and contentment that needed no translation. And I get to stay with my teacher, it added with obvious joy. The Council has approved my request to serve as permanent cultural liaison. We'll continue working together. From janitor to ambassador to permanent partner in interstellar diplomacy, Kai mused. I suppose stranger career paths have existed, though I can't think of any examples. Through the viewport, he could see the stars that no longer represented distant mysteries but potential destinations, worlds where other species waited to share their knowledge and learn from humanity's unique perspective on existence. The universe had become infinitely larger and more welcoming than he had ever imagined possible. You know, he said to Spark, watching a dragon vessel depart for destinations that existed in dimensions humans were only beginning to understand, I think this might be the beginning of something extraordinary. Spark's response was a symphony of agreement and anticipation, electromagnetic harmonies that spoke of friendship, adventure, and the absolute certainty that the best discoveries always began with someone choosing kindness over indifference. The small dragon who had once been silent in captivity now sang with the voice of infinite possibility, and the human who had helped it find that voice had discovered that sometimes the most important journeys began with the simple decision to listen.